Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The planet was hell-painted in crimson hues. Kyle Maverick, survival systems engineer of the cargo vessel Persephone, had been limping through this hell for 3 days now. His escape pod, a smoking wound in the desert's flesh, lay miles behind him, its emergency beacon weakly pulsing a distress signal into the uncaring void. His water supply had dwindled to mere sips. Hunger twisted his intestines into a tight knot that no amount of discipline could ignore. Each step was a calculation of energy expenditure versus distance gained. The crash had been sudden, violent. A micrometeorite storm, they'd call it in the official report, if there ever was one, if anyone ever found him. The rest of the crew, were they alive? Had anyone else made it to the pods? Questions that haunted his every waking moment, but couldn't take priority over his immediate survival. Kale collapsed against a rust-colored rock outcropping, shielding himself from the dual suns that beat down mercilessly. His parched tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth as he rationed his final sip of water. In the shimmer of heat, he saw her, a small girl with his eyes and her mother's smile, reaching out to him. "Ellie," he whispered, stretching his hand toward the mirage. His daughter dissolved into the heat waves. A hallucination. She was light years away, probably being told that Daddy wasn't coming home. Again. Not dying. Here. He croaked, forcing himself to his feet. He was an engineer. Survival was just another problem to solve. From the meager emergency pack, he retrieved a thin, reflective thermal blanket. With trembling hands, he rigged a solar, still using pieces of his environmental suit and pod debris. Moisture would condense on the blanket and drip into his collection vessel if he survived the night. By morning of the 4th day, he had collected barely a quarter cup of water, enough to keep moving, but his body needed more than water. It needed calories. The alien landscape stretched endlessly before him, broken only by jagged rock formations that jutted from the rust-colored soil. As he trudged forward, something massive caught his eye, a structure too regular to be natural. He altered course. What he found made his breath catch, a graveyard of bones. Enormous, bleached white by the suns, some partially melted and fused with the surrounding rock as if subjected to incredible heat. The skull alone was twice his height, its eye sockets cavernous and empty, its jaw lined with teeth the size of his forearm. What the hell could kill something this big? He whispered, running his hand along a rib bone that curved up from the sand like the support beam of some grotesque cathedral. A primal fear stirred in him. Whatever ecosystem existed here, it operated on a scale he wasn't equipped to understand. He needed to get moving, find food, find shelter. Using components salvaged from his pod's navigation system, electrical wiring, and a flexible metal plate from the emergency hatch, Kyle constructed a trap. It was a complex mechanism, pressure plate trigger connected to a rapid closing snare, calibrated for small prey. He positioned it near what appeared to be animal tracks and retreated to watch from a distance, conserving his energy. Hours passed. The first sun began to set, casting long shadows across the crimson landscape. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, the trap's mechanism snapped. A small, armadillo-like rodent struggled in the snare. "Got you?" Kyle whispered, his voice a rasping husk from disuse and thirst. His cracked lips formed a smile that felt foreign on his face. He gathered dry, wire-like bushes and arranged them into a small pyre. The vegetation was sparse, but combustible, almost too combustible, as if the entire ecosystem was designed to burn. With hands that trembled from exhaustion, he struck his emergency flint until sparks caught the brittle vegetation. A small flame bloomed, hungry for fuel. But he needed a spit to roast his prize. Kale's eyes scanned the immediate area and settled on something protruding from the sand several feet away, something straight and artificial looking. He stumbled toward it and pulled. The object slid from its sandy grave with surprising ease, sending him stumbling backward. In his hands was a long, smooth spear carved from what appeared to be white bone. similar to those in the massive graveyard he'd passed, and crowned with a metallic tip that gleamed dully in the harsh light of the binary stars overhead. The craftsmanship was exquisite, alien yet unmistakably designed for hunting. The bone was polished to a pearlescent sheen, etched with symbols he couldn't begin to decipher. The metal tip wasn't any alloy he recognized. It had an iridescent quality that shifted colors as he turned it in the light. "Just my luck," he muttered, returning to his fire and skewering the small carcass onto the improvised spit. He settled by the fire, extending the makeshift rotisserie over the flames. The meat sizzled, releasing a tantalizing aroma that made his stomach clench painfully in anticipation. Kyle closed his eyes momentarily, allowing himself the small luxury of imagining normal food. The synthesized protein bars from the ship's galley suddenly seemed like a gourmet feast in his memory. As the spear warmed above the flames, the symbols etched into the bone began to shimmer almost imperceptibly at first. The iridescent markings pulsed with a subtle glow that shifted from deep purple to a sickly green, then to an ominous crimson. Without warning, all sounds ceased. The constant whisper of wind across sand, the soft crackle of his fire, the distant calls of unseen creatures, all gone, replaced by a preternatural silence that pressed against his eardrums like a physical force. Kale's eyes snapped open. Nothing had visibly changed. The same endless crimson desert, the same rock formations, but the silence, it was wrong, unnatural. Then came the vibration, a deep bass resonance that started below the threshold of hearing and quickly rose in intensity. The sand around the fire began to ripple in concentric circles. The spear in his hands hummed, sending painful tingles up his arms. His teeth clenched involuntarily, fillings resonating with the frequency. Nausea washed over him as his inner ear struggled to compensate for the disturbance. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was a response. To him? To the spear. Kale scrambled to his feet, dropping the rodent into the flames. The spear continued to vibrate in his grip, its vibration intensifying until it felt like it might shatter his bones. The symbols now blazed with an inner light, pulsing in rhythm with the vibrations. An unnatural cold brushed against the back of his neck. A shadow, too solid, too defined to be cast by the setting suns, slid across the rock beside him. Kyle whirled. "You have activated the call." The voice behind him was melodious, like crystal chimes, yet cold as the vacuum of space. Keel froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. Slowly, he turned. She stood atop a rock formation that had been empty moments before. Tall and lithe, with skin the color of a storm-laden sky, and hair as white as sun-bleached bones that cascaded down her back in intricate braids. Her features were almost human, yet undeniably alien, high cheekbones, a narrow nose, and lips that held no color. But it was her eyes that transfixed him, golden, pupilless orbs that contained nothing but terror and icy fury. She wore armor of an unfamiliar material, segmented like an insect's carapace, adorned with what looked like teeth or claws. A curved blade hung in her hip, its edge gleaming wickedly. She descended from the rock with preternatural grace, her movements fluid like water over stone. Her expression was a mixture of horror and something deeper, a religious dread, as if witnessing a sacred taboo violated before her eyes. Her gaze wasn't fixed on him, but on the spear he held over the fire. Her nostrils flared, and her posture shifted from cautious to aggressive in an instant. She reached out toward the weapon, not touching it, fingers trembling in the air inches from its surface. "You defile the bone of the Silent One," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You summon death with your ignorance." Then louder, with a cold certainty that chilled his blood, "Now your species is on the menu." They called her Lyra. She didn't kill him, which surprised Kale more than anything since the crash. Instead, she roughly wrenched the spear from his grasp, her touch reverent yet fearful as she handled the ancient weapon. The charred carcass tumbled into the sand, forgotten. "Walk," she commanded, her voice allowing no argument. "You come. See what you have done." Kyle stumbled to his feet, muscles protesting after days of deprivation. I don't understand. Understanding comes later. Walking comes now. She prodded him with the butt of the spear, keeping the heated bone portion far from her own skin. They walked for hours across the harsh landscape. Keel, already exhausted from days of survival, struggled to keep pace with her fluid, tireless stride. She moved like water over stone, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground, while his boots sank into the loose sand with every laborious step. As they traversed a narrow canyon, Keel's attention was caught by something dark and viscous pooled in the shadow of a boulder. He approached cautiously, a corpse or what remained of one. The creature resembled a large, six-legged herbivore, its thick hide shredded as if by countless razor-sharp implements. Its internal organs had been removed with surgical precision, the cavity swarming with iridescent insects that scattered at his approach. The horde, Lyra said, noticing his gaze. They do not just kill, they harvest. 100 yards further, they found an entire feeding ground. Dozens of carcasses in various states of decay, arranged in a perfect circle. At the center, a crystalline structure jutted from the ground, pulsing with the same sickly light he'd seen in the spear's symbols. Breeding ground, Lyra said, her golden eyes narrowing. Fresh. They are already coming. As they continued, Kyle studied the geological formations with professional interest. Despite his situation, the engineer in him couldn't help but notice details: the stratification of the rock walls indicating cycles of flooding, the crystalline deposits that might suggest underground water sources, the peculiar angle of the rock faces that spoke of tectonic activity. There's water nearby, he said, breaking the tense silence. Underground. These crystal formations only occur when mineral-rich water evaporates slowly over time. Lyra didn't slow her pace or acknowledge his observation. I could help you find it, he persisted. Improve your water collection systems. She stopped so abruptly he nearly collided with her back. She turned, her golden eyes narrowing. You think we don't know where water is? You think we need human to find what has sustained us for generations. She spat the word human like it was poisonous. You save your help. You've helped enough already. The scorn in her voice silenced him, but not before he noticed something, a flicker of curiosity beneath her hostility. She'd been listening, evaluating his words, even as she dismissed them. This weapon, she explained as they resumed walking, her grasp of universal improving as she adapted to his comprehension, not for cooking. Sacred. Dangerous. She struggled with certain concepts, supplementing with gestures when words failed her. The spear, she explained, was carved from the bone of what she called the Silent Wanderer, a gigantic, blind predator that had once been the apex hunter of this world, the same creature whose remains Kyle had stumbled upon earlier. Its bone, when heated, emitted a unique low-frequency signal, a signal that only they could hear. The horde, the scourge of the planet. This signal, Lyra said, her back straight as a rod as she walked ahead of him, never turning, it means wanderer dead. That great hunt can begin. Great hunt, Kale panted, stumbling over a hidden rock. She paused then, turning to look at him with those unnerving golden eyes. Hunt everything. Eat everything, until nothing left but them. A chill ran down Keel's spine that had nothing to do with the rapidly cooling desert air as the suns began their descent. And I activated this signal, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Yes, she replied simply. You called death to us all. They crested a ridge, and Keel's breath caught in his throat. Below them stretched a massive canyon, its walls striated with bands of ochre, crimson, and deep purple stone. And nestled within it, protected by the natural fortifications of the landscape, was a settlement. Structures of bone, hide, and some crystalline material caught the fading light, creating a kaleidoscope of colors. Smoke rose from dozens of cooking fires. Figures moved about, all with the same blue-tinted skin as Lyra, though their hair colors varied from her pure white to shades of silver and pale gold. It was beautiful, alien, and now, because of him, in mortal danger. Lyra gripped his arm, her fingers like steel bands around his bicep. "You come now. You face those you condemn." She dragged him down the steep path toward the settlement, her strength belying her slender frame. Keel stumbled repeatedly on the loose scree, but she never slowed, never offered assistance. He was cargo, not a companion. Lyra's village was in chaos when they arrived. Blue-skinned warriors honed weapons of bone and metal, while others herded children toward the deepest caves. Elders, their skin a paler blue and etched with intricate tattoos or scars, were gathered at the canyon entrance. When they saw Kyle, their faces contorted with rage. "Him!" shouted one, pointing a gnarled finger at Kyle. His white beard was elaborately braided with small crystals and bones that clicked together when he moved. "The outsider brings death." The crowd surged forward, weapons raised. Kyle tensed, preparing for the end. But Lyra stepped between him and her enraged tribespeople, her posture radiating authority. "He did not know," she shouted back, her voice carrying across the canyon. "His guilt is ignorance, not malice, but he is the cause." She turned to look at Kyle, her golden eyes unreadable. "And he will help us survive, or die with us." From the crowd emerged a towering warrior, his blue skin crisscrossed with ritual scars that formed intricate patterns. His head was shaved except for a central ridge of silver-white hair, and his arms bore metal bands embedded with what looked like teeth. His eyes, unlike Lyra's gold, were a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "You defend the destroyer, Lyra." His voice was deep, resonant, carrying the weight of authority. "Has your time among the trading outposts softened your resolve?" "My resolve is to our people's survival, Kraz," Lyra replied, her chin lifting defiantly. "Not to blind tradition." Kraz approached, towering over both of them. His hand rested on a massive blade slung across his back. "The traditions kept us alive when the last call came. When my family, my children, were torn apart before my eyes." His gaze shifted to Kyle, hatred radiating from him in almost palpable waves. "The pink skins have no place here, and this one has doomed us." "Then kill him now," Lyra challenged. "Waste his knowledge. Waste any advantage we might gain." "Knowledge?" Kraz scoffed. "What could this frail creature know that would help us against the Horde?" "Test him," Lyra insisted. "Then decide." An elder stepped forward, placing a gnarled hand on Kraz's arm. "Wisdom before action, war leader. Let us hear the outsider." Kraz's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. "Speak, Doombringer. What knowledge do you bring that could possibly outweigh your crime?" All eyes turned to Kale. Exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, but he straightened, meeting the warrior's gaze. "I'm an engineer," he said simply. "I solve problems." Kraz's laugh was like stones grinding together. "You are the problem." "Then I'll solve myself," Kale replied evenly, "along with your Horde situation." A murmur ran through the crowd, surprise, skepticism, and perhaps a flicker of hope. Before Kraz could respond, the canyon echoed with screams. A sentry stumbled into the gathering, blood streaming from a gash across his chest. "A scout," he gasped. At the south passage, he collapsed, revealing a foot-long barbed stinger protruding from his back. Chaos erupted. Warriors grabbed weapons. Elders herded children deeper into the caves. Kraz bellowed orders, organizing a defensive line. "Let me see it," Kyle demanded, grabbing Lyra's arm. "The scout creature. Let me help." Lyra hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Come." They raced toward the south passage, Kraz and 6 of his best warriors ahead of them. The passage narrowed to a natural bottleneck, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast. Beyond it, something moved in the shadows, something that clicked and chittered with metallic precision. "There," Lyra whispered, pointing. The creature emerged into the dying light. It resembled a massive scorpion crossed with a mantis, its segmented carapace gleaming with an oily iridescence. 6 limbs ended in serrated claws, while the 7th, a whip-like appendage tipped with the same barbed stinger that had killed the sentry, arched over its back. It had no eyes, only a series of vibration-sensing organs that pulsed along its head. Kraz and his warriors formed a tight line, shields interlocked. The creature paused, its antenna waving as it assessed the threat. "Those plates on its thorax," Kyle whispered urgently. "They're overlapping armor, but the joints are vulnerable." Lyra finished, studying the creature with new eyes. The scout charged, its stinger lashing forward with blinding speed. It struck a warrior's shield, the barb punching through the tough hide and narrowly missing the man's face. The warrior stumbled back, shield arm numbed by the impact. Kraz swung his massive blade, aiming for the creature's head. The edge connected but skidded off the armored carapace, barely leaving a scratch. The creature countered, its front claws snapping at Kraz's legs. He leaped back, but not quickly enough. One claw caught his thigh, slicing through leather armor and drawing blood. "The joints," Keel shouted, "between the third and fourth segments." Lyra knocked an arrow, her golden eyes narrowing in concentration. She aimed not for the creature's body, but for the narrow gap Keel had identified. The arrow flew true, slipping between the armored plates and sinking deep into the soft tissue beneath. The creature screeched, a sound like metal grinding against metal. It thrashed, its movements becoming erratic. Kraz, seeing the advantage, drove his blade into the same vulnerable spot, twisting with brutal force. The scout collapsed, its limbs twitching in death throes. Ichor, thick and phosphorescent, pooled beneath its body. Kraz turned to Kyle, his midnight eyes reassessing the human. "You saw its weakness." "Engineering," Keel replied. "Everything built has structural vulnerabilities, even living armor." "The horde is coming," Lyra said, her voice tight with urgency. This was just the first. Kraz looked from Lyra to Kyle, then back to the dead scout. He made a decision. "You have until dawn," he told Kyle. "Show us how engineers wage war." They locked Kale in an empty cave with a crude door of interwoven bone that night, more for his protection from vengeful villagers than to prevent escape. Through the lattice, he watched as the village prepared for battle. Children cried as they were ushered deeper into the canyon. Warriors painted their faces with symbols that glowed faintly in the gathering dusk. Elders performed rituals, burning herbs that released pungent smoke. And he felt the weight of guilt crushing his chest. He hadn't meant for this. He'd just been trying to survive. One small fire, one simple meal, and he'd doomed these people. The bone door rattled, then swung open. Lyra entered, carrying a clay vessel of water and a small bowl of what appeared to be dried meat. She set them down before him without ceremony. "Why did you defend me?" Kyle asked, his throat dry from thirst and fear. "I defend my people's best chance," she replied coldly. "Not you." She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she crouched before him, studying his face with those unnerving golden eyes. "What do you know of resonance?" she demanded suddenly. "Of frequency propagation?" Cal blinked, surprised by the technical nature of the question. Quite a bit actually. My specialization was in environmental systems, life support, habitation design. Sound vibration is crucial for human comfort in confined spaces. The spear's signal. Can you describe what you felt when it activated? Low frequency vibration, he replied, trying to recall the precise sensation. Below normal human hearing threshold at first, then rising. It seemed to affect my inner ear, caused nausea. Lyra nodded slightly. The wanderer hunted by sound, not sight. The horde fears the sound of its approach. It's, what is your word? Echolocation. So that the heated bone mimics this echolocation, drives them away. No, Lyra's expression darkened. What you did, heating over open flame, it creates the death cry. The signal that the apex predator is gone, safe for them to emerge to feed. She leaned closer. But the wanderer's bone can create other signals too. Our shamans know some. Not enough. Kyle's mind raced with implications. It's about the specific frequency pattern. The heating method, duration, maybe even the part of the bone used. He looked up sharply. You have other weapons like this. Other bones. Some. Sacred. Not for outsiders. I don't need to touch them. Keel pressed. Just understand how they work, how they're used. Physics doesn't care about sacred or profane, Lyra. It cares about wavelengths, amplitudes, resonance patterns. She stared at him, clearly not comprehending his terminology, but understanding his intent. You think you can create a signal to drive them away? I think I can try, but I need to understand the tools I'm working with. Lyra stood abruptly. Rest now. Tomorrow, our war leader Kraz will test your worth in council. If you have knowledge that can save us, speak it then. She moved toward the door, then paused. If you lie, if you fail, he will kill you himself. The bone door closed behind her, leaving Kyle alone with his thoughts and the enormous weight of lives, depending on knowledge, he wasn't sure he possessed. At the Council of Elders the next day, Kale stood in the center of a circular chamber carved directly into the canyon wall. Light filtered through crystalline formations embedded in the ceiling, casting prismatic patterns across the gathering. Kraz sat directly opposite him, flanked by scarred veterans of previous horde encounters. Lyra stood to one side, her face carefully neutral. The outsider claims he can help us, announced the eldest council member, a woman so ancient her blue skin had faded to a pale periwinkle. But Kraz demands proof of his worth. Kraz rose, his massive frame blocking the light. Words are wind. Action is truth. Show us you are worthy to fight alongside the Nakai outsider. Two warriors approached, carrying a collection of weapons, blades of various shapes, clubs studded with crystalline spikes, what appeared to be a primitive bow. Choose, Kraz commanded. Then face me. A murmur ran through the chamber. Even Lyra looked alarmed. He is weak from his journey, she protested. This is not a fair test. The horde will not be fair, Kraz growled. If he cannot face one warrior, how can he face thousands? Kale looked at the weapons, then at Kraz. The warrior outweighed him by at least 50 kilos, all of it muscle. In his weakened state, Kale wouldn't last 10 seconds in direct combat. But he hadn't survived 3 days in the desert by being stupid. No, he said firmly. The chamber went silent. You refuse the challenge? Kraz's voice was dangerously soft. I refuse the premise, Kale replied. You want me to prove my worth? Fine, but I'll do it my way. He turned to the council. You face an enemy that outnumbers you, that wants to consume you, and your solution is to stand in a line and hit it with sticks. He shook his head. That's not bravery. That's bad math. Kraz took a threatening step forward, but the elder raised her hand, stopping him. Let him speak. I'm an engineer, Kale continued. I don't win fights with muscle. I win them with this. He tapped his temple. The scout we killed yesterday had weaknesses. All structures do. Give me 1 day. 10 of your warriors. Let me show you a different kind of warfare. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Walls. Pit traps? These were tactics for the weak. But Lyra, her authority bolstered by her accurate prediction of the scout attack and her successful kill, insisted. Give him 10 warriors and 1 day, she said, her voice brooking no argument. Let us see what the outsider's cunning can achieve. Kraz's face darkened with rage. When his tricks fail and the horde comes, I will feed him to them myself. If my plan fails, Kale replied evenly, I'll walk out to meet them willingly. The council approved the proposal, though most clearly expected it to fail. As they filed out of the chamber, Lyra approached Kale. You have made a powerful enemy, she murmured. I've already activated an alien beacon that's summoning a swarm of flesh-eating monsters. Kale replied with grim humor. What's one more? For the first time, a hint of a smile touched Lyra's lips. You are either very brave or very foolish, Kyle of Earth. Engineers prefer the term innovative, he said. Now show me everything you know about the canyon's geography, and I need to understand more about these creatures we're facing. Kyle worked tirelessly, his engineer's mind solving problems even as his body ached with exhaustion. He didn't waste time building a conventional wall. Instead, he utilized the canyon's natural features. He showed the warriors how to undercut the bases of rock outcroppings, creating precarious balances that could be triggered to cause avalanches at strategic moments. He directed them to dig concealed pits along likely approach routes, lining them with sharpened bone spikes. He identified narrow passages where the Horde's numerical advantage would be neutralized. The blue-skinned warriors, initially skeptical, gradually developed respect for this different approach to warfare. They had never considered battle in such terms: physics, leverage, stress points. This was a different kind of war, a war of the mind. "You fight with thoughts," said Kraz, who had arrived to observe their progress with undisguised contempt. "We fight with hearts and blood. When your traps fail, remember that I offered you a warrior's death. What the Horde will give you will be far worse." "These aren't just traps," Kyle explained, despite knowing the warrior had no interest in understanding. "They're a system, each one designed to funnel a Horde into killing zones where your warriors can engage them with maximum advantage. Hiding behind rocks," Kraz spat, "like prey animals. Using the environment," Keel corrected, "like apex predators, like your silent wanderer did." That comparison silenced Kraz momentarily. The massive warrior studied the carefully engineered deadfall they had just completed, a massive rock shelf balanced on supports that could be removed with a single well-placed strike. "The wanderer hunted alone," he finally said. "It needed no tricks." "And it died," Keel replied quietly, "leaving only its bones as weapons for your people. Maybe if it had been a little more innovative, it would still be protecting your world." Kraz's midnight blue eyes narrowed. For a moment, Kyle thought he might strike him. Instead, the warrior turned and stalked away. "You provoke him unnecessarily," Lyra said, appearing at Kale's side. "He has lost much to the Horde." "So have all of you," Keel replied. "But you're willing to try something new to survive. He'd rather die gloriously than live pragmatically." As they worked, Kale learned more about this world and its people. They called themselves the Nakai. They had once been nomads, following herds of native herbivores across the Crimson Plains until the Silent Wanderer, a predator so massive it made the earth tremble with each step, had forced them to seek shelter in the canyons. The Wanderer had kept the Horde in check, hunting them as they hunted others. A balance, precarious but functional. But the Wanderer had died or been killed generations ago. And now only the ancient weapons made from its bones kept the Horde at bay. The heat signal warned them away, mimicking the presence of their only natural predator. Until Kyle had unknowingly reversed the signal, transforming a warning into an invitation. Evening brought the return of the scout, or rather, what remained of him. His blue body was mangled, chunks of flesh missing as if scooped out by massive jaws. He died in Lyra's arms, managing to whisper only one word. "Coming?" That night, no one slept. The vibration in the earth grew more distinct. Lyra approached Kyle, who was adding final touches to his defensive map. "Your traps, will they work?" For the first time, something like hope colored her voice. "They'll slow them down," Kyle answered honestly. "Give you a chance, but there are too many. It's not enough to win." "Why do you help us?" she asked. "You could hide. Wait it out." Kyle looked up at her, his eyes heavy with fatigue. "I have a daughter," he said softly. "She's 10. I haven't seen her since she was born. This cargo run was supposed to be my last. I was going home." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Her mother and I. We didn't work out, but I've been sending credits home, building a future for her. Every assignment, every dangerous cargo run. It was all for her, so I could finally be the father she deserves." He fell silent, staring at the map without seeing it. "Her name is Ellie. She has my eyes and her mother's smile. I've only seen her in transmissions, growing up in still images and short videos while I was hauling cargo across the stars." His voice cracked slightly. "This run would have paid off the last of my debts. I was going to buy land near her school, build something permanent. And now you build defenses for strangers," Lyra observed. "I want there to be places in this universe where fathers come back to their daughters. Your village is one of them. If I can help, I will." For the first time, Lyra saw him not as an outsider, not as an engineer, but simply as a person, a father separated from his child. And in that moment, she realized his fate had become important to her. She placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that transcended their different origins. "We will fight together, engineer of Earth, for your daughter and our children." From across the chamber, Kraz watched their exchange in silence, his scarred face unreadable. For a moment, his gaze lingered on a small bone pendant that hung at his neck, a child's toy, carved with intricate patterns. In the distance, the ground began to tremble more insistently. From the mouth of the canyon came an alien sound, a high-pitched chittering that raised the hair on the back of Kyle's neck. Kraz approached, his massive form silhouetted against the starlight. "They come," he announced grimly, "to battle stations. We will see if the outsiders' tricks are worth the time we wasted on them." Lyra's hand tightened on Keel's shoulder. "They are coming faster than we expected. We needed more time." "We'll make do with what we have," Keel replied, rolling up his map. "Get your best archers to the high positions we marked. Signal teams to the trigger points for the avalanches, and I need your fastest runners for communication." Lyra nodded, her golden eyes gleaming with determination. "And you?" "I'll be at the command point we established, coordinating." "Hiding," Kraz growled as he passed. "Directing," Keel corrected. "Each of us uses the weapons we have, Kraz. Yours is strength. Mine is strategy." The warrior paused, then gave a curt nod. Despite his disdain for Kale's methods, the urgency of the moment demanded unity. "Fight well, in whatever way you can, outsider. The Horde gives no second chances." With that, the village mobilized for battle. Children and elders retreated to the deepest caves. Warriors took their positions, some at Kel's strategic points, others in traditional battle formations led by Kraz. From his elevated position on a ledge halfway up the canyon wall, Cal could see the mouth of the canyon. The darkness beyond seemed to writhe and pulse. The chittering grew louder, accompanied by a sound like thousands of claws scraping against stone. And then they emerged into the starlight, a living wave of chitin, fangs, and claws. They attacked with the first rays of the suns. It wasn't an army, but a seething mass of segmented bodies, multiple limbs, and gleaming carapaces. The front ranks surged forward, their collective weight pushing them into the canyon entrance, where Kraz and his elite warriors waited in traditional formation, a wall of shields and blades. Keel watched from his command position, hands gripping the rock edge so tightly his knuckles whitened. This was the moment of truth. "First avalanche team stand by," he called to the runner beside him. The young Nakai tensed, ready to sprint with the message. The creature slammed into Kraz's defensive line with horrifying force. The Nakai warriors held, barely, their shields locking together as they were pushed backward step by step. Kraz roared orders, his massive weapon cleaving through the frontmost attackers. But for every creature that fell, 3 more pushed forward. "They're being overwhelmed," the runner said anxiously. "We should signal the avalanche now." "Not yet," Keel replied, his eyes never leaving the battle below. "If we trigger it too soon, we'll hit our own people. Kraz needs to pull back to the marker." "They won't retreat," the runner protested. "Not Kraz. Not his elite." Cal knew he was right. The warriors below were fighting with desperate courage, but pride kept them from executing the planned withdrawal. They were dying where they stood. "New plan," Kale decided. "Signal the second team instead. We'll force the Horde to flank, give Kraz a moment to regroup." The runner sprinted away. Moments later, an avalanche thundered down one side of the canyon, crushing dozens of creatures that had been scaling the walls. The massive attackers, momentarily confused, diverted toward the remaining open passages, exactly as Kyle had hoped. The pressure on Kraz's position eased slightly, but the warrior leader, instead of using the opportunity to fall back to the stronger defensive position, pressed forward with a shout of triumph. "No, damn it," Kyle muttered. "Hold the line, don't advance." But Kraz, seeing the enemy falter, seized what he thought was an advantage. His warriors surged forward with him, breaking the careful defensive formation. The horde, as if sensing the tactical error, collapsed around the advancing warriors like a closing fist. Within seconds, Kraz and his fighters were surrounded, cut off from the main force. From other positions, Nakai archers rained arrows down on the creatures, aiming for the vulnerable joints Kyle had identified. Many found their marks, but the sheer numbers of the horde made the efforts seem futile. Kale's mind raced. The entire battle plan was unraveling because of Kraz's reckless advance. If the warrior leader fell, the Nakai morale would collapse. He made a decision that sickened him. Signal the first avalanche, he ordered the returned runner. The youth's eyes widened, but Kraz and his warriors are still in the zone. I know, Keel said grimly, but if we don't seal that entrance now, we lose everything. The entire village. The runner hesitated, then sprinted away with the fateful message. Phil watched as the signal fire was lit. High on the canyon wall, the Nakai team removed the final supports from the undermined rock face. With a sound like thunder, tons of stone crashed down, burying dozens of the horde creatures, and sealing off any retreat for Kraz and his surrounded warriors. Forgive me, Kale whispered, though he knew the warrior leader couldn't hear him. But Kraz was not so easily killed. As the dust cleared, Keel saw that the warrior and a handful of his fighters had survived, now backed against the fresh rockfall, fighting with the fury of the doomed. The battle continued across multiple fronts. The remaining avalanches were triggered according to plan, channeling the horde into prepared killing zones where Nakai warriors could engage them with maximum advantage. The pit traps claimed hundreds of victims, the creatures' weight driving them onto the sharpened stakes below. But there were too many. They climbed over their fallen, breaching defenses, finding new routes into the canyon. A second wave, larger than the first, loomed at the horizon. From his vantage point, Kyle could see the pattern of the battle unfolding. The defenses were working exactly as designed, slowing the enemy, inflicting maximum casualties, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Send word to begin the evacuation of the inner caves, he instructed a runner. The secondary defenses need to be ready. As he turned back to the battle, he saw Lyra fighting at a crucial juncture where the creatures had broken through. Her blade flashed in the morning light as she led a desperate counterattack to plug the gap. Even from a distance, he could see she was wounded, blue blood staining her side, but she fought on with undiminished ferocity. Near her, impossibly, Kraz still lived. The warrior had fought his way back from certain death, leaving a trail of slain enemies behind him. His shield was gone, his armor in tatters, but his weapon continued to rise and fall in a deadly rhythm. Then Kale saw it, a massive creature nearly twice the size of the others, pushing through the ranks toward the exhausted defenders. Its carapace bore markings that the others lacked, and its movements seemed more deliberate, more intelligent. A leader, Keel realized, they have a command structure. The giant creature reached the defensive line where Lyra fought. With one sweep of its massive limb, it sent 3 warriors flying. Kraz, seeing the threat, tried to reach Lyra's position, but was cut off by a surge of smaller enemies. Lyra stood alone before the monster, her blade seeming pitifully inadequate against its armored bulk. Keel knew what she would do before she did it. Saw it in the set of her shoulders, the slight shift in her stance. She was preparing for a suicidal charge, a final, desperate attack to buy time for the evacuation of the children and elders. In that moment, watching her prepare to sacrifice herself, something clicked in Kale's mind. The spear, the temperature differential, the silent wanderer's cry. Wait, he breathed. That's it. He turned to his remaining runner. I need to get to my escape pod, now. And I need the bone spear. The young Nakai looked at him in confusion. The battle is here. The pod is beyond the fighting. Trust me, Keel said urgently. I know how to stop them. All of them. But I need the cryogenic fuel cells for my pod. The runner hesitated, then nodded. I will bring warriors to escort you. No, Keel said firmly. They're needed here. Just get me the spear. I'll find my own way to the pod. Minutes later, Keel was sliding down a narrow ravine that bypassed the main battle, the ancient bone spear clutched in his hands. Its surface was warm to the touch, still resonating with the frequency that had called the Horde. The journey to his escape pod was a nightmare, a mad dash across terrain, now crawling with the advanced scouts of the Horde. Twice he nearly died, saved only by his knowledge of the terrain and the creature's blind spots. The escape pod lay where he had abandoned it days ago, its white hull now stained with the planet's rust-colored dust. The emergency hatch hung open, exposing the interior to the elements. Keel ducked inside, making straight for the environmental control system. The pod's main power was dead, but the emergency systems operated independently. With practiced hands, he disassembled the cryogenic cooling unit, extracting the self-contained fuel cells that powered it. Each cylinder, above the size of his forearm, contained chemicals that, when mixed, produced temperatures approaching absolute zero, cold enough to preserve human life in emergency hibernation. He wrapped the cylinders in his tattered shirt to protect his hands from freezer burns and sprinted back toward the canyon. The battle had intensified in his absence. The Nakai were being pushed back, their defensive line fragmented in several places. Kale returned to find Lyra and her best fighters holding the last, most desperate onslaught. The creatures were breaking through, pouring into the village proper. In the midst of the chaos stood Kraz, blood-soaked and surrounded by fallen enemies, still fighting despite multiple wounds. The giant leader creature had cornered Lyra against a rock face. She was wounded, one arm hanging useless at her side, but she still raised her blade in defiance. "Lyra!" Keel shouted, "Hold on!" He pushed through the chaos, the spear in one hand, the cryogenic cylinders in the other. A creature lunged at him, and he barely dodged its snapping maw. He reached Lyra's side just as the giant creature prepared to strike. With desperate strength, he thrust the spear between them and the monster. "Now!" shouted Kale. He grabbed the spear and pressed the cryogenic elements against it. The bone, still hot from its proximity to the battle, hissed on contact with the supercooled metal. Frost crept along the shaft in crystalline patterns. The temperature differential, from heat to extreme cold in seconds, created a molecular stress that traveled through the unique crystalline structure of the bone. A crack appeared along the shaft, spreading rapidly. From it emanated a cold blue light that intensified as the fracture widened, and then came the scream. It wasn't a sound in the conventional sense. It was a vibration that began at the quantum level and propagated outward, transcending the boundaries between physical sensation and psychic impression. Humans and the Nakai couldn't hear it audibly, but they felt it, a piercing, cutting resonance that made ears ring and bones tremble. The very air seemed to crystallize with cold, the sound waves visible as patterns of frost forming momentarily before sublimating away. For Lyra, it was more than a physical sensation. As the bone shattered, releasing its stored energy, she gasped as an alien consciousness brushed against her own, the death cry of the silent wanderer, preserved somehow in the molecular structure of its remains. For an instant, she felt its ancient agony, its fury, its final defiance against the Horde that had finally brought it down. The Horde heard it, felt it, remembered it in the collective genetic memory that bound them together. The closest creatures convulsed, their segmented bodies twisting unnaturally. Their maws opened in silent screams as the signal tore through their primitive nervous systems. The giant leader creature reared back, its limbs flailing in what could only be described as panic. It emitted a high-pitched keening that seemed to ripple through the ranks of its followers. And then they ran. In panic, trampling each other, they turned and poured away from the canyon. Those climbing the walls lost their grip and fell. Those in the tunnels fought desperately to escape, crushing their own kind in their frenzy. Within a minute, it was over. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Kyle stood, holding what remained of the frost-covered spear, now cracked and fractured, the blue light fading from its core. The cryogenic elements had shattered from the temperature differential, their remaining contents leaking out as vapor that coiled around the ancient bone like ghostly fingers. Lyra stared at him, her golden eyes wide with shock and something like awe. She had felt the death cry, had shared for an instant in the ancient consciousness of the planet's apex predator. "You saved us," she whispered. "We saved each other," he replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. From the rubble of the battlefield limped Kraz, his massive frame now diminished by wounds and fatigue. Blue blood covered his torso from multiple gashes, and one eye was swollen shut. He moved slowly toward them, stopping before Kyle. The warrior said nothing. Instead, he looked down at Kale's hands, the engineer's hands, calloused from work, but not from war, now blistered from handling the cryogenic cells and cut from the spear's fracturing. Then he looked at his own massive palms, created and trained for battle, now slick with the blood of enemies and friends alike. Slowly, deliberately, Kraz placed his right fist against his chest in the Nakai gesture of respect and inclined his head. No words were spoken, none were needed. In that silent acknowledgement lay more eloquent recognition than any speech could convey. They didn't let Kyle leave. He became the guardian of the call. Together with Lyra, who became the leader of her people after the death of many elders in the battle. He studied the fragments of the spear and other bone artifacts. They learned to create different signals: repellent, attractant, warning. The engineer and the warrior, mind and strength. With careful experimentation, Kale discovered that the bone's unique crystalline structure responded differently to various temperatures and application methods. Slow heating produced one frequency pattern, rapid cooling another, percussion yet another. Each affected the horde differently, some driving them away, others confusing them, still others calling specific subgroups. The Nakai began to rebuild. Their losses had been heavy, but they had survived what their legends had described as unsurvivable. And they had the Guardian now, the outsider who had turned their enemy's weapon against them. Kegel taught them technologies they could build with local materials, simple pumps to bring water from the depths, better kilns for their pottery, stronger weapons. And Lyra taught in their ways, their language rich in nuance, their hunting techniques, their spiritual beliefs centered around the bones of ancestors and the rhythms of the twin suns. Even Kraz came to accept him, though the warrior never fully abandoned his traditional ways. "We need both paths," he told the young warriors he trained. "The old ways and the new, the heart and the mind." Then with a glance toward Keel, but mostly the old ways. A year passed. The emergency beacon from Kale's pod, strengthened by modifications he'd made with Nakai crystals, finally reached a passing Earth vessel. The rescue ship landed at the edge of the canyon. Kale went out to meet them, carrying a new spear, one he had crafted himself, combining the remaining fragments of the original with alloys salvaged from his pod. It was engraved with both Nakai symbols and engineering formulas, a tangible symbol of the synthesis he had helped create. "Lieutenant Maverick?" The captain stepped forward, surprised recognition in his eyes. "We thought you were dead." The company listed the entire crew of the Persephone as lost with all hands. "Just me," Kale replied. "As far as I know." The captain nodded soberly. "We picked up your enhanced beacon by chance. Command is offering a substantial bonus for your recovery. Seems your cargo is more valuable than you were told." He glanced at the settlement visible in the distance. They're also talking about a commendation, full promotion, complete amnesty for the Sarah's incident. Hell, they might even name a ship after you. For surviving? Kyle asked skeptically. "For completing the mission against impossible odds," the captain corrected. "You're something of a legend already, the lone survivor who made it home." Home. The word echoed in Kyle's mind as he looked back at the village, where blue-skinned children played with toys he had crafted from the wreckage of his pod. Near the canyon entrance, he could see Lyra instructing a group of young Nakai, showing them how to construct a simple pulley system he had designed. She paused in her demonstration, looking toward him, her golden eyes finding his across the distance. In the year they had worked together, they had developed something beyond respect. A connection that transcended their different origins. Not quite love, not yet, but the foundation for it. A shared purpose, a shared triumph. "I'm not going back," Keel said finally. The captain raised an eyebrow. The bonus alone would set you up for life. Your daughter could attend any academy in the system. Kale's heart twisted at the mention of Ellie. That's the only thing that makes this hard. The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I've seen this before. Sometimes what we find out here changes us too much to go back. He gestured to his crew. We've brought standard emergency supplies. They're yours, and I can arrange for regular supply drops if you want. Thank you, Keel said, relief washing through him. There is one thing. My daughter, Ellie Maverick. She's with her mother on Europa Station. Can you get a message to her? Of course. Kyle hesitated, trying to find words that could bridge the gulf between worlds, between the life he had planned and the one he had found. Tell her that her father is alive, that I found something I never expected, a place where I'm needed, where I can make a difference. He swallowed hard. Tell her I'm building a new world here, and when she's older, if she wants, there's a place for her in it. Tell her I didn't abandon her. I'm just waiting for her to join me when she's ready. The captain nodded. I'll see she gets the message personally. As the rescue ship lifted off, Keel walked back to the canyon. To Lyra. To the Nakai. To the life he had chosen. The spear in his hand no longer represented his mistake, but his redemption. Not a call to death, but a call to a future neither he nor the Nakai could have imagined alone.